Yay, we're on. Amazing. Welcome to this session on building trust in your data, why data governance is key to success. We got a lot to go through today. We're really excited. We're going to see what is data governance. Then we want to look at some of the different governance domain. And we also want to conclude on why should you care? Why is data governance so important? And while we're going through this, we are also going to go through some demos on Azure Purview. Before we start the cool things, let's have a quick introduction. So my name is Marte. I'm from Norway. I am part of organizing Data Saturday Oslo together with Johan, and also on the Microsoft Data Platform user group in Norway. And love all things data, talking a lot about Power BI, but also governance in general. And when I'm not geeking, I like to be outdoors, skiing, climbing. So if anyone ever go to Norway for some trad climbing, let me know. We can climb together. Johan.
Yeah, so my name is Johan. I work for Deloitte. I am an MVP, and I do a lot of geeky stuff, and I volunteer, for instance, here. So that's about me, yeah.
Cool. OK. So what is data governance? Well, it's a lot, but you can say that it's part of data management. You need to think about the data architecture, data privacy, metadata, documentation, data modeling, data quality, you know, kind of a lot of stuff. But there's more. You also need to think about business glossaries, data storage, processes. What processes should you have? The data catalogs. Are you going to have any policies? What about data lineage? And what about the roles? So all of this, kind of a really big topic. And if you Google it, you can get a definition that says something like, data governance is the specification of decision rights and an accountability framework to ensure the appropriate behavior in the evaluation, creation, consumption, and control of data and analytics. Whew, that's kind of heavy. So what we want to do today is go through some of these topics and then combine that theory with the practical implementation and the practical tool of Purview. So, Johan, do you want to give us like some motivation? Why should we care?
Well, as long as you start pushing in your data, you start building your data warehouses, you build reports, you need to make sure that people can trust that data. Because if they don't trust it, they will never use it. So making sure that you can make the data available to them, that they can use it, that it is consistent, and of course you have data integrity and security in place as well. So as I said, data governance is about building trust from your users into the data that you make available to them. Without that trust, most of the work you're doing is actually just building fancy Excel sheets. It's not a lot of use. So making sure that your bosses see data as an asset and that your users then know where to look for the data and that they really trust what they're seeing.
Yeah. OK, so what we're going to go through today specifically, we're going to have a look at data management, business glossaries, data privacy, data catalog, data lineage, and data quality. And we're starting out with data management. So what is data management? That's part of the data governance domain, but it's actually the doing of the data governance. So you're actually performing the policies, the standards. You're making sure that things are organized and that you're following the best practices. And why do you want to do this? Well, if you don't do that data management, you're going to lose control. So you want to do it to be able to deliver, control, protect, and enhance the value of your data assets. And data management on its own also got a lot of different topics from data governance inside it. So multiple ways to start out with this, but usually you would start out with defining some of your data governance capabilities. So what do you need? Do you need to do something on data quality? Do you need to build, set up master and reference data, for instance? what's important for your organization to be able to trust their data. And then you will start building these processes. How can we enable this? How can we improve that quality? And then you also need to think about all these roles and responsibilities. So how are you going to enforce the data governance? How are people going to actually make sure that you're fulfilling this data governance? And the roles and responsibilities are really important because you need someone on the other end. It's not enough to just build all these really important policies. Someone needs to be like, yeah, cool, I'll do that responsibility, I'll do that, and then I'll tell everyone else in the organization that this is important and that they need to do this. And then we have the data catalog.
Yeah, so data catalog is maybe what most people will think about when they're thinking about data governance tool. And the data catalog is, again, the main repository for your metadata about your data state. So that's where you want to inventory whatever you have to support it. So you might find data search there. You will find data profiling in most tools. You can find data lineage, even though data lineage might be seen as a separate, it is a separate data governance topic. Most data catalogs do have data lineage tools inside as well. And then you can come up with things like certified data sets, so make sure that people know that some data sets have higher value or have data quality scores on them and so on. And of course, a lot of data catalogs also include a business glossary, even though business glossary is also a separate data governance term. And you might have rule management, so you can apply for access to data that you find there. You can have impact analysis, which means that if you changed something in the source, one column, how might that impact the rest of the flow in the lineage from your data transformations out into a Power BI report, for instance. And vice versa, you can also sometimes look the other way around and say, okay, this KPI in Power BI failed, and you use the same lineage backwards. There are several different tools available. I mean, as with everything else with data or IT, there are plenty of tools. Elation, Collibra, Informatica, and Purview are four major suppliers of data catalogs. You also have open source versions such as the Data Hub project, which is LinkedIn's internal and then open sourced data catalog, or Amundsen.io, which I think was Uber or Lyft open sourced. But these four, or at least Elation, Collibra, and Informatica, are high on the Gartner Magic Quadrant for data catalogs, though they tend to come with a high entrance price. And then you have Purview, which is seen as, I mean, it's Microsoft's own tool, seen as a very cheap offer, though that, of course, is open for discussion depending on your data state size and amount of scanning and so on.
Do you want to click over there? It's even smoother if you just click on the computer. Then you can decide. Cool.
And yes, so why should you have your data catalog? Well, you want to make sure that you have control of the data. And this is also from a GDPR perspective. If you know what data you have about whom, or at least where you have the personal data, that is something that is in your metadata, and then you'll find it in your data catalog. You identify and inventory new data assets that you onboard. And of course, you enable your users to find the data and make use of it. So let's see if we can take a look at Purview. And again, it's because it's easily available as a demo. It's of course cheaper to use something like Data Hub project, but then I have to start spinning up VMs and so on. I couldn't be bothered with that. So Purview is the newest version of the Azure Data Catalog. It is quite basic in its user interface. Collibra and Informatica, and you will see Elation later on, have a bit more polished look, but Purview is still developing. So this is where your user would go in. It is a bit silly long URL, but if you link that from your intranet page or from somewhere internal, it's easier to just get hold of it that way. Also, Purview integrates with Synapse, so you can search all your assets within Synapse Workspace, which is makes it even better in that aspect as long as your users are using Synapse Studio. You can search your catalog here. You can browse your assets. There is also something called business assets, which is in the preview, which is you can define business assets as a business process or an application workflow or something like that. But typically, you want to either search your data catalog, and you can look at it as mapped to Power BI. You can browse your assets, and then you can go by source type, for instance. I have one data factory installed here. Data factory itself connects and reports directly, whereas Synapse Analytics and Power BI, Purview has to scan for it. And then I can go in and I can, okay, I have one data warehouse with a schema, and I have several different tables. And here you can see that there's an asset description. I haven't put anything in here. Manage attributes if there are any. I can put classifications in here. And this is something that then adapts to the Microsoft Purview data loss prevention setting. So you can start flagging sensitive objects here. They will also scan and automatically find if there are any sensitive data inside the object. So here you have geolocation. It will give you the full qualified name. Sadly, we cannot browse or do profiling within Purview. Hopefully, there will come something there soon. Then it also shows you the collection path and the hierarchy that you can find, again, drill down from it. And if there's any business glossary terms connected to it, you will also find them here. And here I have one, which says, yeah, is it travel or a trip is a tour that starts and ends and is with a taxi. And you can also then find if there's any related terms or anything, but I haven't put anything in here. So data catalog has lineage, it has glossaries, and it has the entire mapping of your estate. Might just go a bit further in here, and I'll see it by go back to the trip data again. You also see here that it has some properties attached to it. You can find the schema. And here you can see I can add glossary terms, and I can add these geolocation classifications on the column level is automatic scans. There are patterns included in Purview, and you can add your own as well. There is a lineage on it. You have contacts, so you can define experts or owners. And again, that is important if you want to ask a question to somebody. Though in Purview, this means that if I click on this, I will get open an email. So it's not as advanced as it could be if you look at the next demo that we'll show afterwards. And then you can also tag related data. So again, it's easier for people to find whatever else is related when they start browsing. So that is a very quick introduction to Purview.
Yes, and then we wanted to show you more than one tool. And we didn't really have a demo environment, but we did have some screenshots. So we want to show you this, even though these screenshots are a bit old, but just to show you the difference. So how could it look? So this is Elation. Got a bit of a different feel to it, I would say. But here as well, you could do some searching. You have all the assets that you could add to your catalog. And if you click on one asset, for instance, date dimension, the table that we all know and love, it could look like this. So also here, you could add descriptions to that data asset. You might want to see some sample columns, sample content, and on the right side here, you can see that you can add some tags. So you can actually set up tags for your organization that could be, directed to or connected to the business areas or parts of the organizations or roles or whatever. So you can use your imagination there as well. Set up the roles of the stewards, if you have any data managers, technical experts, and so on. Yes, and also, as Johan just showed, in Purview, if you want to email someone about something in Purview about a data asset, you get the email and then you can, write an email. But here in Elation, they got this built-in inbox solution. So if you're inside some sort of data asset, you can say that, okay, you know what, I have some questions about this. You can put up a new conversation. You can say, who do you want to ask this question? You can tag the asset that you want to ask about. So here it's the report on bike sales. And then, you can write your question. So for instance, if there are any discussions on definitions or, anything really, or that someone is saying, oh, there's an error here, you can also actually later on search the history of that conversation so that other people as well can see, oh, right, so we already had this discussion, this is why we've done that, or okay, this was actually wrong in the past, now it's correct. So it's much more transparent and built-in and easy to use. So that is kind of cool with Elation. And Elation also got these rules that you can propagate. So here's an example of that. So now it's we have a column that is starting with this contract ID name. And the rule then is that if you have a column that starts with this, then they should have this description. So you can set up that as a rule and then propagate that throughout your catalog, and then it's much easier to manage. And in Elation, that's called catalog sets. So then you can have these catalog sets set up, and it's easier to manage if you are, a data steward or some role that are managing the data assets. Yes, and also want to show, so in Elation they have this Compose, they call it. It's a built-in query editor. So you could also query the data directly in Elation. So again, if you want to explore the data, you want to have a look and get to know the data assets, you can do that directly in Elation as well. And also collaborate with others and send them their scripts and be like, oh, hey, cool, I found this data. Send them the SQL script and share that knowledge as well. So a bit different field than Purview, but also they're kind of the same.
Yeah, the challenge, of course, is these third-party catalogs. They tend to come with a quite hefty price because they're licensed instead of pay-as-you-go. Yeah. So 100,000 euros maybe as a starting point, roughly, for a normal-sized business. It's quite a hefty starting price, but of course, they are much more mature, as you can see from Elation's feature set. Collibra and Informatica also are very richly featured. Compared to what Purview is right now. But again, for most people, it might be better to start off with something like Purview and then expand afterwards, because that price tag is quite hefty.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so next up on our list of all the things data governance is business glossaries. So why is this important? Why do we care about that? Probably, maybe, I'm guessing that some of you have experienced that you're talking about a data asset, but you're not referring to the exact same thing, actually. Or you might not agree on the definition on something. For instance, what is actually a gross sale? Is it all the sales without the sales that didn't go through the last part of the sales process, or is it, something else? And if you don't have these business glossaries and definitions, and you have decided on these terms, it could be really difficult to trust the data. So we're going back to the trust issue. You might see different reports showing different numbers, but talking about the same thing. So then someone will assume, wow, the data warehouse is so bad. Everything is wrong. Even though it's perfect, it's exactly what it should be, but something happened on top on the maybe in Power BI, and someone used different definitions, for instance. So the business glossary is, therefore really important. We need to have that common understanding, reduce the risk that it will be misused, and improve that alignment between technology and business. And we have a demo for this as well. You showed it briefly, but if you want to dig in a bit more.
Yeah, I just mentioned that we had this session in Seattle in November, and there was one guy in the audience. He had his CEO, his CFO, and his COO all had different definitions of sales, and none of them wanted to budge. So in the end, I think he had to go over the head of them all to the board to get somebody to approve. But because they had wildly varying definitions, everyone had their report where they looked at the sales from last week. That can't work. I've also had a Norwegian ferry operator that had the same definition for something called passenger mix. And for marketing, that passenger mix was the number of people or tickets they had sold from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Poland, whatever. Whereas for the operations, their definition was that it was the number of, or the various people on board. So how many pensioners, how many students, how many truck drivers, how many families, because pensioners and students buy a lot of tax-free and drink a lot in the bar, whereas truck drivers only carry their own food. They just want somewhere to sleep while they're traveling. So widely the varying definitions of the same thing. So it's important to make sure that you have an alignment on it. And if nothing else, we can look at the demo. It's possible to make a hierarchy where everyone can have their say, and at the same time, you can have control of it. So again, Purview being a bit rudimentary, but you can define your business glossaries. And in the business glossaries, you can also add terms or new glossaries. You can have templates that makes it easier for other people to fill in these terms. And then, if I just zoom in a bit more. So trip here says a travel that has a pickup location and time and a drop-off location and time. It can add some terms to it. We can also make it hierarchical views. You can have, again, sales as a company or enterprise-wide definition, and then sales as COO looks at it, and what the CFO says. And also you can have experts and stewards on this, because again, if somebody wants to contact you, either because they have questions about what does a trip really mean, or they have some questions because they might have, from a business side of view, they might have a different understanding, so they want to open up discussions about something, they can contact you. There are also in Purview different wizards that makes it, for instance, for these glossaries, you can start a flow to point out errors or ask questions that way, and then that will be an automatic mailing to the person that is set as a contact for that workflow. So business glossary is quite simple. It's just that you need to maintain it to add all the different definitions to it. Sometimes in large organizations, that means that there has to be a data management board that sits down and agrees on conflicting terms. Other times it might be that just the domain owner or business data owner decides for their data set, and then that's it. Right, then we're on to data quality. And data quality is important. And the reason why it's important is because two things. Again, it's back to the trust part. If you want your users to trust that data, it's important that they also understand the challenges that come with a data set. You might have 100% data quality score on a data mart. That's fine. Then everybody knows it's trustworthy. But it might be a data set that's only meant for trend analysis or ad hoc analysis, and you haven't really done a lot of data quality checks on it, so it might only score, say, 50%. And it's important that people know, as they look at the data set, what it is able to do for them. And that data quality score isn't something that you say, let's just set that to 50. You will want to have an automated function to do that for you. Data quality score also has a second part of it, and that is being able to verify if something is wrong in the data that comes from the source systems. And for one company I was working with, they had their supplier or vendor registry was horribly put in. They didn't really have control over what people were entering, which meant that they had a huge amount of invoices coming in and then just getting stuck because finance couldn't find the right vendor for it. And they ended up with something like 300,000 euros in late fines a year. That's quite a lot of money. And if you compare that with what Collibra costs, is around 100,000 euros, you can see the business case already. So you would want to have something that, of course, you can do a manual job and have somebody go in and check every now and then to see, okay, has Marte again entered free text into a field that should be postal code or VAT code or something else? You're amazed at the amount of people who actually do that. There are, of course, a lot of people I discuss with from the data warehousing side who say, well, data quality is something that you do in your data pipelines. It's something you do in your ETL. No. That is, pardon my French, but it's peeing in your pants to fix it. It works for a while, and then it just gets more problems. So you want to have a system that automates the checks and then reports that back to your users who are responsible for the source systems. And that can be done, for instance, in Collibra. You can have a rule set that scans. In the Norwegian setting, you have the VAT registry. They have rich APIs that you can connect to. You can scan and say, okay, is this a valid VAT number? Yes, no. Is it a Norwegian VAT number? Is it the VAT number that is attached to this name or this company? And these are checks that then can be scored back. At the same time, you can look up postal addresses and verify if it's the right address for this. You will then get a list. You can, of course, have systems that automatically update your ERP system, though that's maybe not a popular choice from the source system owners. So sometimes it's best just to give a report saying to the data owner that, okay, in this vendor registry, you have these companies that have a wrong VAT number. You have these vendors who have a wrong address. Please fix it. And then we do another iteration of that next week, and they get a new report saying, okay, you fixed these, but we have these coming in. And this way, it's easier to find the problems and fixing them in the source instead of just cleaning that data out. And if we count, again to my client who had this 300,000 euros late fines a year, if you also add on all the manpower that they needed to do things manually, we would come up with a savings of 1.2 million euros a year. So data quality is costly, but there are solutions. Even though they come with a hefty license fee, the business case is quite clear anyways. So it might be worth checking that out. I have heard some rumors that the Purview people are working on data quality, even though right now there is nothing to show for here. I know it's been on the roadmap for a while at least. So yeah, it's important to make accurate, informed decisions to decrease your risk and increase the trust in the data, and then of course also reduce operational costs. As I mentioned, we have the manual corrections when spotted. We have the checks and corrections in the ETL pipelines, still not very good. And then finally, the specialized and partially automated data quality solutions that come with a price, but make the work a hell of a lot easier.
Right, okay, and then we have data lineage. So what is that? Well, it's the process of understanding, recording, and visualizing data as it flows. So what you want to do is that you want to visualize how data is coming from your source. If you're lucky, and if it's really good, you also might see the transformation and how it's changing, and maybe coming in from different sources, and then ending up somewhere. maybe in a report or maybe in a different database. And why is this so important? Well, it helps users, again, trust their data, because now it will be then transparent. Okay, so I'm looking at this report. Could I check out the lineage? Could I see what sources we're pulling from? And then it will be easier to understand what you're actually looking at. And again, trust what you're looking at. Of course, it's also important for organizations where you're looking at compliance. So are we actually pulling data from the correct places? Are we allowed to do this? And you can also do impact analysis through data lineage. So if you want to, or you know that you're going to change your data somewhere in this lineage view, you can see, okay, so that means all of these reports may probably, or probably maybe not work tomorrow. And then you can warn your users, for instance. So lineage, really powerful, also in the governance way of thinking. So I feel like lineage is something we're talking about a lot. Now every tool is like, yeah, you have lineage, you can click here and see the lineage. But why do you need it? Well, you need it because of these things when you're thinking with your governance hat on. And we do have a demo of that as well, right?
We do.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Right, I'm back at the homepage of Purview. And then I've scanned my Power BI estate as well. You can do that in Purview. I'll click on it. You can find some information. And then you have the lineage part. So, just remember this is a very, very cheap demo environment. It's not very feature-rich. But you have the ability to scan your Power BI estate. You can find, okay, it comes from a data set that's called taxi and goes out to a Power BI report. There is also the option of doing the same thing in Power BI. Let's just see if we can zoom it in. And right now, at least, it does look a bit better in Power BI, even though it will improve also in Purview, in that you can start going all the way back to the data sources. Right now, I haven't been able to scan the SQL Server that is part of the data set in Purview, but that is something that is coming. Purview also now has an ability, it was released 3 days ago, to enable you to connect to the Unity catalog and pull out lineage from your Databricks estates and all the workbooks there. It's still quite a simple lineage, but in the proper setting you can get column level lineage on your data state, which enables, at least from a technical point of view, pretty decent lineage functionality for you. But again, the most important part of the lineage is to make sure that you have compliance and that you can track the changes that has been done over your ETL pipelines, and that is what the data lineage is for.
Yeah, and I think also in Power BI you actually have the impact analysis view. So you can see downstream, if you click on an object, you can see, okay, so these, inside that data set, for instance, these tables will be affected by whatever change you might make. So yeah, so it exists. And
yeah,
hopefully
Power BI in some aspects actually has a slightly better functionality than Purview in lineage, at least from the Power BI state. But hopefully that will be improved in Purview as well.
Yeah. All right. Data loss prevention and privacy.
Yeah, so data loss prevention and privacy is an important part of data governance. It's also quite interesting that Purview itself was launched as Azure Purview. It's now Microsoft Purview, because they're moving from just a data catalog or data state to being a security enterprise asset, so asset management system instead. Because data loss prevention is, I mean, it's really important for your company. It contains tools and processes to prevent loss, misuse, and or theft of sensitive data. Whereas privacy are tools and processes to keep track of all the personal identifiable data in your estate and make sure that you have track of it. So data loss prevention can mean that you have ransomware installations, can be that you have unfaithful servants that export sensitive data and take that to one of your competitors, or that somebody gets hijacked at home and data is stolen. For instance, last security incident where mine and a lot of other customers' data was stolen. Great fun. And from a privacy point of view, you have GDPR, CCPA, different compliance issues, which means you can be hit by a hefty fine if you breach GDPR or your privacy. But it's also the loss of public trust and the implication that has for your company's reputation.
Okay, so why should you care? What have we been looking at in this session? Well, kind of a lot of things. So we had a look at data management. That was one thing. You need to actually do the governance that you're setting up, and you need to make sure that there are policies, there are roles, and that the roles exist in the organization, that someone actually gets some time to perform that data governance. They're just not only, yeah, you take care of that, be a steward. They need some, actual hours to do that. Yeah, we looked at data catalog, obviously. I had a look at Purview and a tiny bit of a look on Alation. We looked at business glossary, why that is important. We need to agree on what our data actually is, and to be able to do it, to use it in a proper way, and really take advantage of that. Data quality is super important. Again, also, if your quality sucks, no one is going to trust anything. So yeah, it's important. Data lineage, also with the governance hat on. Why is that cool? Yes, because you can do impact analysis. You can understand how your processes might affect your data. And yeah, and also data loss prevention and privacy. Really important as well. And this is probably what people think about the most when they think about governance, if they're not really into all of it. Because they think, oh, of course, no one that should not see the data can see the data. Obviously, of course, also super important. Okay, so if you look at all of this, and luckily, I think, this is becoming a bit more sexy because these things up here. And now we're thinking about data as managing data, you're actually managing capital. We would like to think of data as an asset. If you have information and knowledge that you get from data, then you have that key to the competitive advantage. And also that reliable, high-quality data can make better decisions. I don't hear people say this that much now, but a couple of years ago, everyone was saying shit in, shit out. And obviously, that's true. So even though we are thinking like this, luckily, it's becoming a bit more sexy. And we agree that data is really important. We want it to be an asset. That's how we think of it. Why don't we all do data governance, Johan?
Good question. And of course, one of the reasons is, as techies, we tend to focus on the tools. I have been at a lot of companies that have bought a new tool, or they just want to discuss which tools should we buy. But data governance is most of all about people and processes, and not the tools. So by all means, start looking for tools, but until you have your people dedicated to their roles, have the data ownership in place, and you have the processes that support that, whatever tool you'll buy, you'll probably lose it, or lose the money. It will just be gathering dust. So it's really important, and as you said, I see a lot of more companies discussing data governance. I see a lot more conferences, people speaking about it, than just 3-4 years ago. And that's really good, because it is essential to the amount of data that we have in our data estate, that people can find it, can trust it, can use it. Because if we want to be data-driven, it's not IT that does that, that's the business users.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully, we made data governance a bit more sexy. And we do have some time for questions, I think. So, any questions or on the online audience?
No virtual questions. Anyone in the audience have any questions?
Wow, we were clear. Okay.
Then you get 10 minutes early.
Yeah, thank you. Please fill out the feedback form, and yeah, come over to us and talk to us if you have any input or thoughts. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.